Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. I'm Maria Casillas, joined here by my incredible co-host, Cody Sizemore. Today, we're going to ask a really important question. Is money the only thing that we're supposed to help our clients with? Now, I asked by throwing in a supposed to, and I did that on purpose. I know that Cody was like, let's just chat about this and see, is that the only thing that we do help with? And I know for sure that the answer to that is absolutely not. I know people help with all sorts of things. But I would like to ask, is it the only thing we're supposed to help with? We're going to throw in a little bit of boundary talk here as well today. Before we do that, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today and all of the other times that you've joined us on this show. And I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Cody. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good.
You're a guest on my show today, Cody.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to have you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I'm honored.
Hey, you're welcome. We'll try it again next week too.
Yeah, I'll be like a repeat guest every single week, So
Perfect. It wouldn't be the same without you.
Yeah. But I'm doing good. Good. Yeah, I brought this topic up because it happened twice this past week in my coaching world, which every single time that we record a podcast, I always look at my calendar of the last couple of meetings I've had. I'm like, is there anything that happened during that time that maybe I could talk about on the show? And this popped up twice, so I was like, it's probably a good one to talk about. Yeah.
So I apologize sort of for the spin that I'm throwing on that, but I hope it's all right with you. I do want you to talk a little bit about what are some of the things that are coming up for your clients that you are talking about. But then I'd like to just talk a little bit about, how do we determine what we are able to talk about? What are we supposed to be doing as financial coaches? And what are we maybe not supposed to be doing as financial coaches?
Sure.
So let's jump into what are some of the things that are going on with the specific clients that you've had over the last few weeks?
So they're just there's situations that are not directly, correlated with their finances as a whole, but they definitely affect the finances. So it's like a indirect kind of thing,
Sure.
Sorry, I had to take a sip of coffee. I had something in my throat. So yeah, indirect, things that affect the finances. And I'll just be kind of brief with the two case studies, and I want to get into too many details, but essentially there's one person that I'm working with, and she has a full-time job as a teacher, but then she also has a side business to where she's actually a coach herself. But she helps, high school seniors with their college readiness kind of thing. So she sells to, high school seniors and their parents kind of thing. Right. And she recently enrolled into my coaching program for her finances. However, she also enrolled into a high ticket coaching program for her coaching business as well. And right now is her slow season for her coaching business. So, we're trying to think of ways to build up that revenue for her, because without that revenue, she's basically breaking even on a monthly basis. And right now she's actually slightly in the hole, like $500 or $600. We just started this past couple weeks here. So getting that revenue up is going to be really important, because once the busy season comes, she's going to make a ton of progress. But right now she just needs those extra funds. Right. So, the conversation came up just kind of organically in our last meeting around, her trying to really step in and get these higher ticket clients as compared to where she was before and what she was charging before. And I just kind of asked her, I was like, well, how is that going? How does that feel? Because a lot of the results of that depends on what we can or cannot do with the finances. And she was like, yeah, it's going pretty good. I feel like some of the script that they're giving me for like these consultations is like a little bit salesy. Like it doesn't feel like me. And I was like,
Mm,
okay, well, I mean, do you want some feedback on any of that? Because like, clearly I have experience with that because you're in my program and I do high ticket coaching programs. And she was like, yeah, like that'd be great. So, we looked into that and, some of it was pretty good. A lot of it was like, yeah, this is why you don't like it. And this is why it's not going to work kind of thing.
So this high ticket program that she engaged in is not at all connected to you.
Not
It's
at
not
all.
one that you're in. It's not one that you're offering. It's completely
Completely
separate.
separate.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And I even told her, I was like, do you want feedback on this? Because my thing is
Yeah.
that I don't want to be, this other voice in your head that's maybe contradicting the people that you hired to help you with this. Right.
Yeah.
I do
Hmm.
not want to be that. And she's like, no, I actually really, really want your opinion because the way that you got me to sign into your program is how I want to get other people to sign into my program, kind of thing.
Love it.
Like how I felt about the whole thing, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, great. So that's one scenario, right? Is literally not helping someone with their finances per se, but actually their business kind of thing. So
Hmm.
that's one. The other case study is a couple that has their adult child, and use that phrase very, very strongly, adult child living in their home, 28-year-old man. Uh, I use that phrase loosely. 28-year-old man who has a son living at home, and they've told him repeatedly for, I guess, years, but
Wow.
have really been, trying to be more active with this over the last couple of months. That they just want him to pay $500 a month to help with like the groceries, to live there, the utilities, whatever it might be. And they also need that money as well, right? But the son just isn't doing it. He's just not doing it. He's either saying like, "Yeah, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. I'll get to it." And it never happens, or they will have like a little bit more of like a heated discussion around it. And what they explained to me is that he just stonewalls them, blank stares them, and then eventually just says the phrase, "Are we done here?"
Ooh.
So, and there's, they have a grandbaby there and they don't want to lose the grandbaby and all this kinds of stuff, right? So then we had a conversation around boundaries. We had a conversation around how to approach the conversation with their son, not for just their benefit, but also for the benefit of having him actually be a man, and then also the benefit of having their grandson have a role model because he's
Hmm.
watching his father kind of thing,
Hmm.
and they don't want that for their grandson. So again, not fully relating to the money, but it's definitely affecting their money, and it's also affecting their relationship and their mental and emotional stability as well.
For sure. Man, how old's the grandson? Do you happen to
I
know?
think he's like 3 or 4, something
Okay.
like that.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm guessing that this conversation would look a lot different if that grandson was not part of the equation.
Correct. And they even said
But
like if the grandson wasn't there, we'd be throwing his stuff on the front lawn, you know.
mhm, mhm,
So
yeah. Okay. Well, we don't need to get into all of the
yep,
nitty-gritty on that one.
yep,
But those are two very good examples of when something comes up that is sort of, related to our client's financial situation. And I think that there are myriad other examples of things like that, especially when it comes to marriages and how people communicate with each other. I mean, just this entire show has really been about how do we dig into some of the emotions and the thoughts around how we spend money and how we behave and relate with money. And so obviously we're not just talking numbers here anyway. So what do you think sort of sets these two scenarios apart from more of the everyday nuances that you're seeing when working with some of your clients?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of the times, the main focus when I meet with my clients is really two things, like their systems and their structures around their money, and then
Mhm.
the psychology of money. You know, how they think about
Mhm.
it, how they behave with it, stuff like that, right? And
Mhm.
that's usually the norm, right? But
Yep.
a lot of the times, I wouldn't say most of the time, but I would say a decent chunk of the time, there's usually something that's interfering with their ability to allow the actual like purpose of why we're working together to
Mm.
work at
Mhm.
its full capacity. And that's these two examples are maybe two, you know, two examples of that happening,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I like the way that you phrased that. Would you be able to do it again?
I don't know. It's so these things are uh causing causing the ability of the main
Yeah,
purpose.
affecting it, yeah, I think you said they're affecting their ability to ultimately do those things, and I also can't repeat it the
Yeah.
way you said it, but, we'll have to go back and figure it out at some point, but it was very well stated, and I think it's actually very common, like you said, that there's always something that's keeping them from being able to move forward with their actual goals, like, I know for our personal lives, as an example, one of the things that sort of messes with our finances if we're not careful is our child's college tuition. And I say it like that because technically it's our child's college tuition, but we have made the decision to help with that. And so it will, if it's not something that we are very aware of, if we have other goals that we're trying to work towards, that might be something that, oh yeah, it's time for that payment again. We gotta work that in. And if it was something that was not decided ahead of time, not discussed ahead of time, not arranged ahead of time, then this would be another example of what might throw our progress off with a coach, for example. And so I think there are many of these out there, and I just really like the way that you stated it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's what sets them apart.
Yeah. So, I think that one point that we want, or there's really 2 points that we wanted to cover today. One is, does this stuff happen? Which clearly it does.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yep.
then the other point would be, well, at what point when these things do come up, is it out of our like realm to actually help these
Mhm.
people with, right? Um,
Mhm. Yep.
mm, to answer the first question, like, yes, they do come up for sure. And I personally think that there's nothing necessarily wrong with like helping people through these things as long as you ask for permission. That's
Mhm.
what I have
That
found has
is
been
very
very,
important.
very key is like even with like this couple with like the son who's living at home. I
Mhm.
asked them, I was like, I don't want to tell you guys how to parent, but what I will ask you is, are you open to any sort of like feedback, suggestions, or perspective on this? And they said, yeah, like totally. Like we're absolutely open to that. And I said, okay. And then I asked another question. I said, how much hardball are you guys willing to play? Because
Mhm.
I also needed to know that too, you know?
Right.
Um, and they were like, we're pretty ready. And I was like, okay, gotcha, gotcha. So I think that prefacing and asking permission is extremely important because you don't want to just like give unsolicited advice for something that they didn't originally sign up for. That's
Correct.
that's
Yep.
number one. Um, before I go any further, what are your thoughts on that?
100%. I was gonna say that that was one of the things I saw you say. It's, do I have your permission to, to dig into this a little bit? And I think that that's super important. I have a specific client who has a counselor on the side, and that her therapist and I oftentimes will say or do very similar things based on my background. But I'm always very, very careful to make sure that I'm not countering what the therapist is saying or doing because that's what she hired that person
Right.
for, and she hired me for something completely different. She knows that there's overlap, and she kind of saw that. That's why she asked for me specifically, because she said, I want to know how this therapeutic stuff is affecting my finances. And so I'm ready for that overlap, but I'm still very, very careful to make sure that I am not overstepping during that. So I'm really, really glad that you said that. And I'm going to go ahead and use this example of the therapy thing to also state that I think one of the ways that once we've asked permission, one of the ways we determine whether or not we can or should be helping in that arena is based on our personal expertise in a certain area. So, there might be more willingness for me to sort of go down that therapeutic, I'm using air quotes on purpose, path with somebody, but I would not necessarily go down the business building path with somebody. That is not something that I feel is in my wheelhouse. I would hire somebody to help me build a business way faster than I would personally feel okay charging somebody for that service. Now, you, on the other hand, have done that on the higher basis and also have an area of expertise for that. So that would be a little bit more in your wheelhouse. And maybe you'd feel a little bit less confident doing more of that therapeutic stuff because it's not something that you've been formally trained in. And so it just goes to show that based on our individual gifts and our talents, that there might be differences in what you can and should be willing to sort of engage in. Always ask for permission, but also know what is your wheelhouse. That would be the second thing for
Yeah.
sure.
And then I'm actually going to phrase this as a question because I think that you probably could answer this better than I could, which would be, when do we know or when can we tell that we've reached a level with these people to where we're like, okay, I've done and I've said what I feel like I can and can say and can do, but this
Hmm.
is more than what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Like, you should
Hmm.
seek counsel in this area, you should seek counsel in that area, whatever it might be, right? Like, when can we identify that? Is it a feeling? Is there like, certain benchmarks that are met, kind of thing? Like, what? How can we distinguish that?
It's a really good question. And I think that sometimes there is just very specific ground um, rules. For example, legality.
Yeah,
So if we're talking about something like financial planning, for example, or we're talking something like true mental health counseling, those are things that people need to be certified for. They need to have licenses for. And so if you're doing something that you need to have a license for and you don't have that license, then it doesn't matter how you feel about it. You just can't be going into that. Like that is a line that you have to just say, look, I understand that you're going through this and I have a heart for that. And I would love to be able to help you with that. Doing so could get me in a lot of trouble. And
yeah,
so I'm not able to do that at this point. I think if it's not something that is black and white legal like that, then I think sometimes it is actually okay to trust your gut instinct on
yeah,
something. So, like you said, is it a feeling? Oftentimes we have that instinctual understanding of when we're at the end or just about ready to cross that line. And I think it's okay for us to say, this feels like a little bit like if I step into that with you right now, that I'm not confident that I'm going to be helping you, that I could
mm,
actually hurt rather than
that's good.
helping. And and so I'm just going to refer you on to somebody here or here. And if you've got some referrals in your back pocket, that's really helpful. But in this day and age, I know this was a lot easier 10, 20 years ago when a lot of the stuff was done in person. So I would have like a network of people who were in the mental health field or who were in, the financial planning field or et cetera, et cetera. And when I was working with clients who were all local, it was a lot easier to say, I can't help you with this, but I know Jack who can, and I know Jill who can over here. But it's a lot harder, I think, these days because so much is online and everything is interstate. And so we don't have that huge of a network all the time, especially with licensure. A lot of licensures are state specific. And so you might know somebody in Arizona, but this person who you're working with is in California, and that's not gonna, that's not gonna
Mhm.
work. So, so you might not be able to give actual referrals for people as much anymore, but you can still state that they need to find somebody who's along that line and maybe even tell them, look for somebody who XYZ has these credentials, but also has these personality traits and that kind of thing. So you can help guide I think, the conversation that way.
I really like what you said around, recognizing that threshold of, is what I'm about to do or say going to help them, or is it going to hurt them? Right.
Yeah.
Um, Recognizing that is huge. And I think that's extremely important for some of the coaches, which I know there's a number of them out here who deal with this, that have some form of a savior complex.
Mm,
Because I think that that's probably a decent amount of coaches. That's
yeah.
probably
That's pretty
maybe
natural.
why we got into this in not I wouldn't say in the first place, but like there's a layer there, you know?
Yeah.
Like we just
Yep.
want to help people. We just want to help people. We just want to help people. I get it. But we need to recognize like when it's actually going to be helpful versus being unhelpful kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that was the big
Yep.
thing that stood
Helping
out
does
to
not
me.
always mean fixing,
Yeah,
right? And sometimes helping means stepping back, and that's the
for
best
sure.
way to help somebody.
For
So,
sure. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a good conversation, Maria. I appreciate you, unpacking this with me. Um, if you're listening to this today and you're like, hey, I actually have this person that's been dealing with this thing, and you're kind of unsure of where you're at with that. Maybe you're crossing that line in certain ways. I would just, encourage you to check yourself, make sure that what you're doing is actually helping them, and making sure that it's legal as well. Um, but
yeah.
then I also would encourage the coaches to where like, hey, maybe there is something going on in a person's life that is causing the financial side of things to be hindered. But you've been unsure if you know, should step in or if you can help. I would encourage you to at least explore it a little bit. As long as it falls within the legality of things and it falls within your skill set, I would encourage you to kind of just like lean into that and see if there's anything in there that you can bring some value to the table for them.
Mhm.
Just be wise with it. That's the big thing, is just be wise with this. So,
That's right.
mhm,
Yep.
yeah,
And also, as we keep, like, beating this dead horse, engage in the community, because if you are struggling to check yourself the way that Cody just stated, it's okay to just ask for outside observation. Like, "Hey, guys, what do you think? Am I overstepping? Am I not? And if I'm not overstepping, how do I manage this piece of it? And if I am overstepping, how do I bring myself out of that?" And I think that it's okay for us to ask each other for that feedback, and I think it actually keeps us out of the fire a little bit.
yeah, yep, I agree.
So, join our community.
What is the community?
I don't know. No.
Okay.
I'm teasing. It is the Financial Coaches Community by New Money Habits on Facebook. We encourage you to join there and just be there as often as you'd like. You can engage by actually typing in things, or you can engage simply by being passive and just kind of watching and seeing. But when you need some of that feedback, then you know that there's a group of people there who are willing to do that for you. You can also contact Cody or I. Just message us right in there if you have a specific question based on something that we've said today, and we'd be happy to walk you through that as well.
Absolutely. Alrighty, guys. Well, thanks again for listening to this episode of the Financial Coaches Podcast. We'll be back next week with a brand spanking new episode as well. So make sure you check that one out too. Until then, you guys just keep crushing it, and we'll see you next week.
See you then.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching.